You've probably heard it called the most powerful military alliance in history. For 75 years, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has been a huge player in global security. But what is it really? And, in a world that's constantly changing, does this old alliance still have what it takes? Well, let's get into it.
To really get NATO, you've got to start with its one central promise. It's a single idea so powerful that it's been shaping the world for decades.
So the name itself, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, kind of tells you what it is, right? It's a formal group of countries. But the real magic is in those two words, collective defense. This isn't just some social club. It's a rock-solid security pact where every member promises to defend every other member if they're attacked.
And this is it. This is that one big promise. Article 5. It's the absolute heart and soul of the alliance. It's the ultimate one for all and all for one. Just think about that for a second. An attack on Lithuania or Canada or Spain is treated as an attack on the United States and all the other members. It's a commitment so huge it basically turns the military power of 32 nations into one giant shield.
So why create something so intense? Well, NATO wasn't born in some peaceful, quiet time. No way. It was forged right in the rubble of World War II, just as a totally new kind of conflict, the Cold War, was starting to take hold.
And you can see just how fast everything happened. 1945, the war ends, and Europe is an absolute mess. The US steps up, basically saying, we're not disappearing this time. But then, and this is the flashpoint, 1948 happens. The Soviets blockade West Berlin. And suddenly, the threat wasn't just some abstract idea anymore. It was real. It was right there. And that urgency led directly to the signing of the NATO treaty just a year later. Wow, it really doesn't get much more blunt than this quote from NATO's very first leader. It perfectly sums up the original mission. Keep the Russians out. That's all about stopping the Soviet Union from expanding. Keep the Americans in, making sure the US stayed involved and invested in Europe's safety, and keep the Germans down. Which is fascinating, right? It shows how they wanted to fold West Germany into this new structure to make sure it could never become a threat again.
Okay, so we've got the why, but what about the how? How do you actually get 32 different countries to agree on something and turn that decision into real military action? Well, there's a system for that.
It really boils down to three main steps. It all starts with the politicians and diplomats in the North Atlantic Council. They talk, they consult, and they make decisions. And here's the kicker. They have to do it by consensus. That means everybody has to agree. Once they do, the top military chiefs on the military committee figure out how to make it happen. And finally, the big strategic commands actually carry out the plans. And, NATO does a lot more than just plan for war. It's got its hands in everything, from managing active crises, think of its long missions in places like Kosovo, to building partnerships with countries that aren't even members. And all of that is supposed to be built on a foundation of promoting democratic values. All right, so that's the theory. That's how it's all supposed to work on paper. But after 75 years, how's it actually doing in the real world? Let's give NATO a little report card and see how it stacks up today. First up, its main job, collective defense. And on this one, it gets a strong grade. This is still job number one. The best proof? Just look at the enhanced forward presence. That's where you have these multinational battle groups stationed all along the eastern border, basically acting as a tripwire. It sends a very clear message. Attack one of us, you're attacking all of us. Okay, next up, crisis management. And this is where the record gets, it gets a little messy. After 9/11, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time, which led to that very long mission in Afghanistan. Now that proved the alliance could fight way outside its own neighborhood. But the chaotic pullout and the final result have led to some really tough questions about what success even looked like. So, it gets a partial grade here. Building security networks, though, that's another clear strength. Through things like the Partnership for Peace program, NATO has built relationships with tons of non-member countries. And we see this today in its support for Ukraine, providing all sorts of training and aid. It's about building a more stable world, and it's pretty good at it. So, a strong grade here.
Promoting democratic values. This one's a mixed bag. It is a core principle of the alliance, for sure, but let's be real. You have members who have very different records on things like a free press or the rule of law. And those internal arguments over what those values actually mean in the real world can cause some serious tension inside the club. And finally, how's NATO doing with all the new stuff, the new threats? The grade here is definitely in progress. The alliance is working to adapt to things like cyber attacks and so-called hybrid warfare, mixing disinformation and political meddling with military pressure. But turning a giant ship with 32 captains is slow, and not everyone's turning at the same speed.
Look, no organization, especially one that's 75 years old and this powerful, gets a free pass. It has its critics, and it has some major challenges. So let's dive into the headwinds NATO is facing right now.
This slide really gets to the heart of the biggest debate about NATO. On one side, NATO says, hey, we're a defensive alliance, countries are free to join if they want to, but on the other side, critics say that by expanding eastward after the Cold War, NATO was seen as a provocation by Russia and actually made things less stable. It's a fundamental disagreement, and there's no easy answer.
And the headaches don't stop there. Inside the alliance, there are constant debates about money and who's paying their fair share. Is everyone too reliant on the U.S.? Then you have the fact that different members see threats differently. A country in the East is probably a lot more worried about Russia, while a country in the South might be more focused on terrorism. And all of that is made harder by the fact that you need everyone to agree, which can be painfully slow when a crisis hits.
So, this all brings us back to that one huge question. For 3/4 of a century, NATO has been a pillar of security. It's adapted from the Cold War to the era of counterterrorism and now back to a world of big power competition. But with the world changing faster than ever, its biggest test might be just around the corner. Can this 75-year-old alliance adapt one more time?